Ethan Ward had lived most of his life on the same wide stretch of land, where the wind moved across the grass like a slow river, and the sky seemed to go on forever. His ranch had once been a busy place, filled with the sounds of animals, laughter, and the steady rhythm of work shared between family members. But now, years later, the ranch felt more like a quiet memory than a home. Ethan was the only one left to take care of it. Each morning, he rose before the sun. His routine never changed: coffee first, then a walk to the barn to feed the few animals he still kept. He moved slowly, not because he was old, but because he had grown used to silence. There was no one to rush for, no one to talk to, no one waiting for him at the breakfast table. He had neighbors, but they lived miles away. Sometimes days passed without Ethan hearing another human voice. People in town described him as the quiet rancher. They meant no harm by it, and Ethan never felt offended. He simply didn't have much to say anymore. When his parents were alive, the ranch felt full and warm. His mother used to sing while hanging laundry, and his father would tell stories about the land, about how every corner of the ranch had history in it. After they passed, Ethan had kept everything running, but the heart of the place felt dimmer. Still, he kept going. The ranch gave him purpose, even if that purpose felt small. He cared for the animals with gentle hands, kept the fences fixed, and made sure the land stayed healthy. In many ways, the ranch cared for him too. It kept him grounded, kept his days structured, kept him from drifting into a life of loneliness he didn't want to think about too much. One morning, while Ethan was repairing a gate, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost didn't recognize the sound. He rarely received calls. When he saw the name Lena from the animal welfare office, he wiped his hands on his jeans and answered. "Morning, Ethan," Lena said in her warm, steady voice. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "You're fine," Ethan replied. His voice always sounded a little rough, like he wasn't used to using it. "What's going on?" Lena hesitated, which wasn't like her. She was usually direct, a woman who didn't waste words. "We've found 2 horses," she finally said. "Siblings. Twins. A rare Chinese breed. They were left in poor condition, and we've been looking for someone responsible enough to take them in." Ethan straightened, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Twins?" "Yes. Identical. It's unusual to see twins in that breed. They're very bonded. It would be hard to separate them. And you're calling me," Ethan said quietly, already knowing why. "You're the most patient person I know with animals that have been through a lot," she replied. "But I want to be honest. They're in rough shape. They haven't been cared for in years from the looks of it." Ethan felt something shift inside him, something that had been quiet for a long time. Concern, curiosity, maybe even a small spark of purpose. "I'll come take a look," he said without hesitation. When he arrived at the shelter later that afternoon, the building was quieter than usual. Lena greeted him at the entrance and led him toward the back stalls. As they walked, she explained more. "We don't know exactly where they came from," she said, "but they were found on abandoned land, underfed, nervous, and tired. They won't let anyone get too close yet." The way she said it made Ethan slow his steps. "They scared?" "Very," Lena answered softly. "They flinch at sudden movement. They don't know what gentle care feels like." When they reached the last stall, Lena stopped. "Here they are." Ethan stepped forward, and the sight in front of him made his chest tighten. 2 horses stood close together, almost touching, as if afraid to be separated even by a few inches. Their coats were dusty and dull, their ribs faintly visible. Their manes were tangled, but what struck Ethan most were their faces, identical, delicate, and filled with a quiet fear that seemed far older than they were. One of them lifted her head slightly, ears twitching at the sound of footsteps. The other pressed closer to her sibling as if trying to shield her. Lena whispered, "We've been calling them May and Lan. May is the calmer one, she's on the left. Lan is more nervous." Ethan approached slowly, careful not to startle them. He kept his voice soft. "Hey there," he said quietly. not expecting them to respond but wanting them to hear something gentle. May's eyes met his for a moment. They were deep, dark, and filled with a kind of silent plea. Ethan felt his heart pull in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if she was saying, "Please be gentle. We've been hurt. We've been neglected. We don't know how to trust anymore." Lan stepped back a little, her hooves scraping the floor. But she didn't move far. She wouldn't leave her sister's side. Lena watched Ethan closely. "We've tried everything. They let us feed them, but they don't seem to relax." Ethan didn't take his eyes off the twins. "How long have they been here?" 3 days, Lena replied. "We hoped to find someone who could take them in together. Someone with space and time." Ethan took a slow breath. He remembered how it felt to lose trust in the world, how it felt to be alone with confusion and fear. He saw that same feeling in the twins' eyes. They weren't aggressive, they weren't wild, they were just tired and unsure of humans. "I'll take them," he said finally. Lena blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? This won't be easy." "I know," Ethan said. "But they deserve a chance. And I've got the room." Lena nodded, relief softening her shoulders. "I knew you'd say that." The process of loading the twins into Ethan's trailer took time. He moved slowly, giving them space, speaking softly, allowing them to breathe and calm themselves. May stepped forward first, cautious but willing. Lan followed only because May did. When the trailer door closed, Ethan placed a hand gently on the metal, as if promising them something: safety, maybe, or patience. The drive back to the ranch took nearly an hour. Ethan kept glancing into the small mirror that let him check on the horses. They stood close together, the way frightened siblings might cling to each other in an unfamiliar place. Their closeness touched him deeply. As he drove, he found himself thinking about the ranch. For years it had been too quiet, too empty. Maybe bringing these two home would change that. Not because he wanted noise or company, but because the ranch had always had space for healing, for second chances. His parents had believed in that. And so did he. When Ethan reached the ranch, the sun was low, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The land looked peaceful, almost welcoming. He hoped the twins would feel that too. He opened the trailer slowly. May looked at him with wide eyes, and Lan hid slightly behind her sister. Ethan didn't rush. He gave them time to adjust to the smell of fresh grass, the open space, the quiet air. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now." May took the first step out of the trailer. Her hooves touched the dirt gently, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there. Lan followed, trembling but staying close to her sister. Ethan watched them, feeling something shift inside him again. Responsibility, hope, maybe even the beginning of a connection. For the first time in a long time, the ranch didn't feel empty. It felt like something new was beginning, something fragile, something important, something that might just heal them all. The first full day with May and Lan began before the sun rose. Ethan woke earlier than usual, feeling a quiet sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. He made his coffee quickly, barely tasting it, because his mind kept drifting to the twins in the new shelter he had prepared for them the night before. He wondered how they had slept. He wondered if they were scared, or if they felt even a little safer than they had at the shelter. When he stepped outside, the morning air carried a soft chill. A light fog sat low along the ground, making the ranch look almost like a different world. Ethan walked toward the stable, listening to the peaceful sound of distant birds waking up. His boots crunched lightly against the dry soil. As he got closer, he slowed his steps. He didn't want to frighten the twins. He found May and Lan standing close together in the corner of their pen. They looked alert, their ears twitching, but they did not appear panicked. That gave Ethan a small sense of hope. He approached slowly, keeping his voice gentle. "Good morning," he said softly. "Just me." May lifted her head first. Her dark eyes watched him with a mix of curiosity and caution. She didn't step forward, but she didn't step back either. Lan, on the other hand, pressed herself closer to May's side, hiding slightly behind her sibling the way a child hides behind someone familiar when meeting a stranger. Ethan stood at a respectful distance, allowing them to see him clearly without feeling pressured. He carried a bucket of fresh water in one hand and a small scoop of oats in the other. He set them down slowly. "This is for you," he whispered. The twins did not move toward the food right away. They watched him, trying to understand if he meant any harm. Their eyes spoke silently. "We want to trust, but we don't know how." Ethan backed away a few steps to give them space. Only then did May take a slow step forward. Her hooves moved carefully, like she was testing the ground before trusting its support. She lowered her head and sniffed the oats. After a moment, she began to eat. Her movements were slow and delicate. Lon remained close behind her, still unsure. She lifted her head once to look at Ethan, her eyes wide with fear. But when she saw May eating safely, she finally joined her sister, nibbling the oats with small, quick bites. Ethan felt a warmth grow in his chest. He had seen animals in fear before, but something about the twins touched him in a different way. Their bond, their mirrored movements, their shared fear, it all told a story of struggle, and he felt honored that he was now part of their healing. After they finished eating, he tried to step a little closer. May looked at him, not aggressive, just unsure. Ethan raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he whispered. Land shifted uneasily, her tail flicking nervously. Ethan stopped moving immediately. He didn't want to push her too fast. Trust wasn't something he could rush. Later in the morning, Ethan began preparing the rest of the ranch for their long-term stay. He cleaned out an additional area in the stable, repaired a loose board in the fence, and brought soft blankets that had belonged to his old horses. Each task felt meaningful, as if he was preparing his home for new family members. Every hour or so, he returned to check on May and Lon. He did not interact with them too much. He wanted them to get used to his presence without feeling pressured. Each time he entered the stable, May would greet him with cautious eyes, while Lan stayed halfway behind her sister. In the afternoon, Ethan decided to open the gate to a small, fenced pasture. It was a safe area, with short grass, and plenty of room for the twins to stretch their legs. But when he opened the gate, they did not walk out. They simply stared at the open space, as if unsure whether the freedom was meant for them. Ethan stepped back and sat on a low wooden stool nearby. He didn't want to force them out. He wanted them to choose it themselves. Minutes passed. Then more. The wind moved through the grass, creating a calm rhythm. A bird perched on the fence nearby and chirped softly. Slowly, May took a step forward. She sniffed the air, ears twitching. She seemed to be deciding whether the world outside the stable was safe. Lan pressed against her side nervously. "It's all right," Ethan murmured. "Take your time." Finally, May stepped through the open gate. Her movements were slow, but confident enough to show a small spark of hope. Lan hesitated, lifting her hoof and placing it back down several times before following May out into the pasture. Ethan watched them walk onto the grass. It was the first time they had touched soft earth freely in who knew how long. May lowered her head to graze, but she kept looking up now and then, always checking where Ethan was. Lon stayed very close, almost touching May the whole time. Watching them, Ethan felt a quiet sense of peace he had not felt in years. It was as if their presence reminded him of something his parents used to say, that healing happens slowly, and usually when no one is rushing it. After some time had passed, Ethan stood up and walked around the pasture a little distance away from them. He wanted them to see him moving without being afraid. May lifted her head and watched him carefully. Lon's eyes followed too, but she looked more startled. Ethan kept his movements calm and predictable. He checked the fence, picked up a fallen branch, and walked in a soft circle. He wanted to show them that he was part of their environment now, and that there was no reason to fear him. An hour later, he crouched down in the grass near a tree. Still far enough away not to intimidate them. He simply sat there, allowing the silence to fill the space. May observed him for a long time. Then something surprising happened. She took a few steps toward him. Not too close, but enough that Ethan noticed the difference. Lan followed. Though her steps were shaky, Ethan stayed still. He didn't even lift his hand. He wanted May to lead the moment. She sniffed the air in his direction. There was a deep understanding in her eyes, something that went beyond simple caution. It felt as though she was saying, "We want to believe you. We want to trust you. But, please be gentle." Ethan's heart softened. "I'll go as slow as you need," he whispered. By late afternoon, the twins were showing small signs of comfort. Their ears were less tense, their steps more relaxed. Lan even flicked her tail lightly as she grazed a small but meaningful sign that she felt a bit safer. Before sunset, Ethan guided them back into the stable. This time, May walked willingly, and Lan followed without hesitation. It felt like progress, quiet, steady progress. Inside the stable, Ethan placed fresh hay and checked their water again. He moved slowly, watching their reactions. At one point, May stepped a little closer to him, not close enough to touch, but close enough to show she was beginning to trust his presence. Lan stayed behind her, but she no longer looked as frightened. When Ethan finally stepped out of the stable and closed the wooden door gently, he paused for a moment. The sky outside was full of warm colors, orange, gold, and hints of pink. The ranch looked alive in the soft evening light. Ethan felt something shift again inside him. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It wasn't emptiness. It was something new. Something steady. Maybe it was purpose. Maybe it was companionship. Maybe it was the beginning of a silent understanding between him and the twins. As he walked back toward his house, the sound of the twins settling down for the night drifted behind him. It was soft and comforting. Ethan smiled faintly, realizing that for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to tomorrow. The journey ahead would not be easy. He knew that. But he also knew something just as important. The twins wanted to heal, and he would be there every step of the way. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm, one that felt new for everyone involved. Every morning, Ethan would wake before sunrise and walk to the stable with a quiet sense of purpose. He moved with calm steps, taking care not to startle May and Lan. And every morning, the twins watched him with a little less fear and a little more curiosity. May began showing small signs of trust. She would look at him longer without turning away. And sometimes, she would take a step forward, as if testing the space between them. Lan still hid a little behind her sister, but even she seemed to relax bit by bit. Her breathing was less quick, her eyes less wide. For Ethan, these small changes meant everything. He knew trust didn't grow overnight. It grew like a slow seed, watered by patience and gentle care. So every day, he tried to provide that softness, hoping it would reach the hearts of the twins. One morning, after feeding them oats and fresh hay, Ethan decided to sit inside the stable with them. He didn't enter their space too deeply, just enough that they could see him clearly. He brought a stool and a book, pretending to read so the twins could get used to his presence without feeling watched. May observed him with curious eyes. She didn't seem frightened. Instead, she seemed puzzled by why this quiet man chose to sit with them. Lan stood behind her, ears twitching but not stepping away like she used to. After a while, May took a few steps toward him. She sniffed the air softly, trying to understand the scent of this man who had brought them to this peaceful place. Ethan didn't look up from the book, even though he sensed her getting closer. He didn't want her to feel pressured. He simply turned the page and continued sitting calmly. May lingered for a moment before returning to Lan's side. It was a small moment, but an important one. It meant she trusted him enough to come near. Day by day, Ethan tried to introduce new experiences. Nothing big, nothing rushed. One afternoon, he placed a grooming brush on the ground a few feet away from the twins. He didn't touch it or try to brush them. He only set it down so they could get used to the sight of it. May approached it slowly, sniffing it with caution. Lan watched her from behind, unsure but curious. When May nudged the brush gently with her nose, Ethan smiled softly. He didn't move toward them. He simply let them explore. The next day, he placed the brush a little closer. May approached again, more confidently this time. On the third day, Ethan lifted the brush and held it loosely in his hand, letting them see it. May took a step forward, her eyes calm. Ethan extended his other hand slowly, letting her sniff his fingers. Her warm breath brushed against his skin. Ethan whispered, "It's all right, girl. Just me." It was a gentle moment, one that told Ethan he was moving in the right direction. After a few more days of quiet practice, the moment finally came when May allowed him to touch her with the brush. He moved slowly, brushing just a small spot on her shoulder. May flinched for a second, but she did not step away. Instead, she let him continue. The soft strokes of the brush moved through her dusty coat, and Ethan saw her relax gradually, as if the touch reminded her of something she had long forgotten: comfort. Lan watched everything from behind. She didn't participate, but she didn't panic either. Seeing her sister accept the gentle touch made her believe, little by little, that maybe this human could be trusted. As the days turned into weeks, the twins began to show more of their personalities. May was clearly the calmer one, brave in quiet ways, always willing to try something new. As long as Lan was close by, Lan was more sensitive, reacting quickly to new sounds or sudden movements, but she watched everything her sister did and often mirrored her once she felt safe enough. Ethan found himself talking to them more often. Not loudly, just soft words meant to comfort them. "You're doing good," he would whisper. "One small step at a time. That's all you need." Sometimes he shared stories about the ranch, about how his parents used to take care of horses, about how many animals had found a home here. The twins didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. His voice was gentle, steady, patient. It carried no fear, no anger, no pressure, only warmth. One morning, Ethan opened the gate to the pasture again. May walked out confidently this time, tail swaying lightly. Lan followed with hesitant steps. Their hooves touched the grass softly, and soon they began to walk around more freely than before. Ethan brought a small chair and sat under a tree nearby, letting them explore. May trotted slowly across the pasture, testing her strength. Lan walked behind her, copying her movements. They looked like two reflections of each other, one slightly faster, one slightly slower, but both deeply connected. After a while, May approached Ethan under the tree. Lan stayed a few feet behind, but she didn't run away. May sniffed the grass around him, circled him once, then lowered her head to graze beside him. It was a quiet moment that said more than words ever could. "You're getting brave," Ethan whispered. The weeks continued with gentle progress. Ethan began introducing them to simple routines, walking around the pasture with him nearby, learning to stay calm when he carried a bucket, understanding that his presence meant food, safety, and care. One afternoon, a soft rain began to fall over the ranch. The air smelled fresh, and the ground grew cool under the raindrops. Ethan guided the twins into the stable, thinking they might be frightened by the weather, but to his surprise, they seemed curious. May lifted her head toward the open stable door, watching the rain fall like thin silver threads. Lan stood close behind her, leaning gently into her sister for comfort. Ethan watched them with a smile. Rainy days had always reminded him of his childhood days, when he stayed inside with his parents, listening to stories while the world outside grew soft and quiet. He wondered if the twins felt a similar calmness. Inside the stable, he brought out 2 blankets. He didn't try to place them on the twins yet. He only held them in his hands so they could observe. May sniffed the air and walked closer. Lan stayed back but didn't hide completely. Ethan draped one blanket over the railing so they could see it more clearly. Slowly, patiently, he introduced it to them. It took several days before they were comfortable enough to let him place the soft fabric over their backs. May allowed it first, lifting her head proudly, as if she sensed this was part of her healing. Lan hesitated, but when she saw her sister standing calmly, she took a small step forward. Ethan brushed her gently, whispering soothing words. When the blanket settled on Lan's back, she looked unsure for a moment, but didn't panic. It was a huge step for her. January turned into February, and the twins began looking healthier each week. Their coats softened, their eyes brightened, and their steps grew stronger. They had gained weight, but more importantly, they had gained trust. One day, Ethan decided to open the larger pasture, the one with the wide open space where the wind traveled freely. He hoped the twins were ready. May walked through the gate confidently, nose up, ears alert. Lan followed with smaller steps but didn't cling as tightly as before. Once inside the wider pasture, something beautiful happened. May broke into a gentle run, a slow, graceful trot that soon turned into a joyful stride. Lan watched her for a moment, then ran after her. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, side by side, like two shadows dancing across the land. Ethan stood at the fence and watched them with a soft smile. The sight warmed his heart deeply. They looked free. They looked alive. They looked happy. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, the twins returned to Ethan's side on their own. May nudged his arm gently with her nose. Lan stood close enough that he could feel her warmth. It was their silent way of saying thank you for patience, for safety, for kindness. Ethan placed his hands gently on their necks, stroking them softly. "You two," he whispered, "have no idea how much you're helping me too." And the truth was, they had healed him just as much as he had healed them. The ranch no longer felt empty. The silence no longer felt heavy. The days no longer felt long and lonely. With every gentle step the twins took, they brought light back into the ranch and into Ethan's heart. As time moved forward, life began to settle into a quiet but meaningful rhythm for him. The storm of the past months had finally slowed, leaving behind a calm that he had not felt in a long time. He still felt traces of old pain inside him, but now those feelings no longer controlled him. Instead, they reminded him how far he had come. Every morning he woke up with a fresh sense of purpose, something he had lost during the difficult days. He had started rebuilding not only his life, but also the way he thought, the way he felt, and the way he saw the world. He kept himself busy with small but powerful changes. He woke up early, stepped outside for fresh air, and reminded himself that life still had endless chances waiting for him. Some days were harder than others, but he did not run away from them anymore. He faced each day with quiet strength. His confidence, which once felt completely broken, was returning piece by piece. He learned to trust again slowly, carefully, but genuinely. As he continued moving forward, he found comfort in helping others who were going through similar struggles. People around him noticed how patient he had become, how he listened without judgment, how he understood the pain behind someone else's silence. Maybe it was because he had felt that same silence himself. He knew how heavy it could be, and he knew how powerful it felt when even one person truly cared. Without planning it, he became a source of support for others. And strangely, being that support healed him too. Meanwhile, the goals he once paused began to return to the front of his mind. He started working again with more focus and determination than before. He built a routine for himself, one he could trust and depend on. He pushed himself to grow not because he wanted to prove anything to anyone else, but because he wanted to prove to himself that he was capable of much more than he once believed. His work improved, his ideas became clearer, and his decisions became stronger. For the first time in a long while, he felt proud of himself. Along the way, he reconnected with people he had distanced himself from. These were people who had cared for him even when he couldn't see it. As he opened up, even just a little, he realized that not everyone he lost was meant to be lost. Some relationships only needed time, understanding, and honesty. He began speaking more openly about his feelings, something he never did before. He learned that sharing his thoughts did not make him weak. It made him human. It made him real. Life was still not perfect, and maybe it never would be, but he no longer expected perfection. He understood that life is a mixture of ups and downs, and both have value. The difficult moments teach lessons, and the joyful moments remind a person why they keep trying. He accepted that a person grows not by avoiding challenges but by facing them with courage. As he continued on this path, something surprising happened. He began to rediscover his old dreams he once believed were impossible. He started planning again, imagining a future that felt bright and full of possibilities. He wanted to travel, learn new skills, explore new places, and meet new people. He wanted to write a new chapter that was not controlled by his past. The idea excited him in a way he had not felt in years. Slowly, he made new connections. They were simple, gentle, and built on mutual respect. He appreciated these new bonds deeply, because he knew how precious true connections could be. Even when he spoke less, people understood the kindness behind his words. Even when he stayed quiet, his presence reflected calmness and sincerity. These were the qualities he developed through struggle, and they became part of who he was. One day, while sitting alone in his room, he looked back at where everything started. He remembered the days when he couldn't sleep properly, days when he felt completely lost. He remembered the mornings when even getting out of bed felt like a battle, and then he compared those memories with the person he had become. The difference was so great that even he couldn't believe it. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for the lessons, the strength, the patience, and the courage he never knew he had. He realized something important. Healing is not sudden. It does not happen in one day. It happens quietly over time, through small steps, small victories, and small moments of clarity. It happens by letting go of what hurts and holding on to what matters. It happens by understanding oneself deeply and forgiving oneself sincerely. He understood now that he was not weak for breaking down. He was strong for choosing to rise again. Months passed, and he grew even more stable, focused, and peaceful. People around him admired his transformation. They saw a person who had faced hardship but turned it into wisdom. A person who had every reason to give up, but chose hope instead. A person who stood up again not because life became easy, but because he became stronger. The most beautiful change, however, came from within. He no longer felt angry or regretful about the past. He accepted it as a chapter that shaped him. He no longer wished things had happened differently. Instead, he appreciated the lessons he learned. He became more patient, more understanding, and more emotionally mature. He realized that sometimes life removes people or things not to punish a person, but to protect them. What once felt like loss now felt like transformation. With time, he built a lifestyle that brought him peace. He balanced work, rest, and personal growth. He learned when to push forward and when to slow down. He learned the value of quiet moments, long walks, deep conversations, and honest reflections. He learned that happiness is not something someone gives him, it is something he builds from within. He also started planning for his future with clarity. He set goals for the next few years, big ones and small ones. He wanted stability, growth, new experiences, and meaningful relationships. He promised himself that he would never allow the shadows of the past to stop him again. He would move forward with hope, strength, and self-respect. One evening, as the sun was setting, he sat outside and watched the sky turn orange. A soft breeze touched his face, and he smiled to himself. It was a simple moment, yet it felt powerful. He felt peaceful, truly peaceful, and he realized something important: he had finally healed, not because life was perfect, but because he had made peace with himself. He had accepted his journey, respected his growth, and embraced his future. He looked ahead with confidence. He knew challenges would still come, because that is how life works. But he also knew that he was ready for them. He had already survived the hardest parts. Everything ahead felt manageable, no matter how difficult it might be. He trusted himself now, fully and completely. The person he had become was strong, wise, calm, and full of hope. He carried no bitterness, no anger, no fear, just lessons, strength, and gratitude. He finally understood that the real victory was not winning against others. It was winning against the doubts and fears inside himself. With a deep breath and a hopeful heart, he stepped into the next chapter of his life, ready to build something beautiful, something meaningful, something truly his own.